the wolf, but Kai the orc, Cai, he was really good. Um, there were a few others, but that come to mind. But Air Chill was weird. Orcs overall were probably like, I think I think in terms of what they could do, I think orcs and ogres were easily the best two classes in Chaos. Um, and like I think Chaos overall, I mean, with the exception of maybe trolls, I think they had a very solid realm, and I think really it was good that kind of like it was monks that really kind of kept Chaos in check more than anything. Um,
Right.
and numbers. For whatever reason, Chaos was just not really appealing as a realm, and I don't know why. I never really played it. I don't know why it was unappealing, because they did have really powerful jobs, and I know Evil really benefited from having a lot more versatility in terms of what you can play, and also because everyone who kind of came to DFC, that's what they were familiar with. So a lot of people made their first stop in Evil. But if you left Evil, you more often than not, I see a lot more players left Evil for good than left Evil for Chaos, and I don't know what it was, what made Chaos so unattractive. Maybe it was the realm layout initially, or maybe the reception. Like I don't know how receptive Chaos was in new players and stuff like that, because I know people were scared of like CCing and realm hopping and all that stuff. And I know Chaos did have a lot of very caustic players at one point or another. I know Blizz could be very abrasive to certain people, especially new players. And I don't know. I don't know what it was, but that was sort of like their issue too, because they weren't affected by light and dark the way the way Evil and Good were, and their jobs, with maybe, like I said, with maybe the exception of trolls, were pretty solid. Pretty solid, I think. So.
Right. So I guess, it kind of begs the question, is there some kind of job or class that was not represented in the old game that could be embellished on in the future?
Well, in regular DF or DFC?
In DFC, we'll say that since there's had more in there.
Jobs that were definitely underutilized. Well, here's the other issue too, right? Evil again had the benefit of having like the guild system. So so we have Nosferatu and we have Coven, we have Sin and we have Revenant. So that was great, but it was also like it was bad too, right? Because if you look at of the two, right, we have imps, right? So we have a backstabber class. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have a lot more Coven, or would you rather have a lot more Nosferatu? So personally, from a leading standpoint, I would have rather have a lot more Coven than have the players split between Coven and Nosferatu. Coven provided way more function in realm, like one-on-one solo abilities. Clearly, Nosferatu were a little stronger, even though Coven could definitely hold their own. In PvP battles, personally, Coven were way stronger. Coven had storms, they had rifts, they could wither and fuck with people's stats, they could bleed, they had pain spells, they had drain, like they had really good abilities. But again, 90% of anyone who played a vampire, they played Nosferatu, because Nosferatu were just, if you wanted to solo, Nosferatu were just a little bit better. They were a little more appealing. They were easier to level. And the same thing, like, all right, so would you rather have a lot more crafters, or would you rather have a lot more burning hand demons? This one's a little more debatable, because tap is really powerful. But, in a lot of situations, I would have much rather had more crafters. But again, that one's debatable. And then again, you have necromancers. Would you have rather have had more sins, or would you rather have more revenants? So that was the issue with Evil, because you kind of had like split numbers, right? Like you'd have like 2 sins, but you'd have like 11 revenants. So everyone who's playing necromancer, you're playing tappers, and now we have no healers. Or everyone who's playing demons, you're all on crafter demons, but you're not on burning hand demons, or you're all on burning hand demons and you're not on crafters. So we kind of lose a little functionality. In terms of just underutilized jobs, I mean, crafters in general, with the exception of maybe goblins, were really underrepresented in the game. particularly crafties and good. I would say it was fairly even in terms of lizardmen and paladins, and skeletons were way overrepresented. And I'm not sure if that was more a symptom of double melee or because skeletons had hide and sneak. So because hide and sneak, again, that led to a lot of soloing, and that was fun. People like to solo. I love to solo. Having hide, and you really couldn't effectively solo unless either you had hide and sneak or you had tap. So, you know, and then again, and from there, I think priests were underrepresented compared to Sins and Orcs. And again, that boiled down to the priests weren't really offensive. Like, if you played a priest, for the most part, you were a healing buffing machine. You didn't really do anything else. You only healed and you only buffed your realm mates. You gave them bless and you gave them spells, and you didn't really PvP. There were a few exceptions. Silver comes to mind. Nightstrike comes to mind. Dimitri comes to mind. Or not Dimitri, Dominic, sorry. Those players come to mind as players who played priests who would attempt to kind of solo and fuck around and fight other people. Silver probably being the best of the bunch in terms of being able to solo effectively, because he played dwarf priest and he was actually pretty good. But priests for the most part were really underrepresented in the game, and you know. But I think imps were kind of underrepresented in evil. I think of the three, rogue, imp, and kobold, imp was probably the weakest of the three. So yeah, it really just depends. Like, what do you do to make them attractive, right? Kobolds, imps, really their advantage was weapon skill. Weapon skill was the advantage imps had over kobolds and rogues. You know, imps could pick up any weapon, and they could use it effectively. Whereas kobolds and rogues, they actually had to train. Rogues had the advantage of they could train armor, and pick their different race. So they had more HP than kobolds and imps. Kobold's real advantage really was kind of, I guess, I don't know, like they had Farsi, I guess, was their advantage? I don't know, like what else they had, really. I know they had Farsi. I don't know what else they had.
Yeah,
but
not much.
Kobolds are really good too, though. I mean, a good Dawn and Dino and Fib and Tyhar, like those are really good kobolds, and I don't know if it was anything special with the job itself, or because they had really good titles and were really high level, or if they were just really good players. Like, I don't know, but kobolds didn't scare me nearly as much as rogues did. So
the only thing that scared me were ogres. Irrationally so, but I was afraid of them.
Well, I'll tell you this: if I get the female ogre here done in a few minutes, you're gonna fear them even more.
Oh no, God no! Take them out of the game.
She's a beast.
Enough ogres, I think, could easily turn the tide of a battle. Wards were a big deal, and I don't know why they weren't used as much as they should have been. They just weren't. Like lethargy wards and endurance wards and stuff like that. Like lethargy ward in particular, lethargy could really swing a battle in Chaos's favor. Like that extra half a second or whatever it did ends up being a really big deal in the course of a fight. It really, really does. And ogres, for whatever reason, they just like to tap, and they would try and follow up. Like, if I were an ogre, if I played, I would run in, tap, and then instantly I would drop a ward. Like, I wouldn't even try and follow up. I would just do my job, tap, 0, and then follow up with a ward. Or conversely, I would never rush. If I did, Chaos didn't really have to rush against evil. There was no reason for them to. We didn't have volley, so there was no reason for them to fight on our terms. Honestly, you know, they could just sit back and just volley until we got bored or we were getting chipped apart, and then let us attack them. They'd never really had to rush. You know, I'm not sure how Chaos and good interactions went. I imagine it was a little more difficult again because monks were an issue for them. So
yeah,
maybe you have a little more insight on that.
I mean, personally, I think I should just generally state that my experience with large battles, just like probably a lot of us, is pretty bad because you know, I know that there's like a meta that each realm can kind of focus on, and I think you yourself are a good example of somebody that understood that and actually acted on it when the game was live. So, you know, to say that I know how Chaos ultimately could win over good, I mean, all I could say is wards and just smart, you know, lizards and smart orcs. I mean, but that's just general, because, I mean, that's like saying, you know, keep everybody alive. But yeah, it's very difficult for me to personally say how you know what was the pinpoint, what was the pivotal thing that won the battle, other than good leadership, other than targeting the right people, other than keeping the right people dead, you know, those kind of things. I don't know if it goes beyond that, but you know, wards were obviously a huge thing, and I think, you know, yeah, I think it's the same for any realm. It's just pinpoint the right people and have the right classes stay on them, you know. So trolls had melee, but it was pretty weak in general, I feel.
Excuse me.
Unless they were, you know, unless we were using a dragon's head spine, which was probably 50-50 depending on the situation, because we were favoring spell staffs, or we were favoring the Mortal's Bane staff, which was a little bit less strong than a dragon spine as far as overall damage output, but it did have the bleed and so
Had
forth.
to bleed.
So.
Yeah, that was one weapon I didn't like. There was a troll back in the day who really abused the shit out of melee and that weapon. I don't know if you remember his name. Is it Pharaoh? Or Pharaoh? I can't remember.
Yes, I do.
He was really, really good. He was probably one of the trolls that I actually didn't like fighting. Him and Kothos, actually.
Right.
And he would abuse the shit out of melee in fights, and he would do pretty well. The healers, because if you don't kill the healers, then you're not going to be able to keep anyone down. And even we would easily pick goblins as targets well over trolls, because goblins had goblin bombs. So if you saw a sentinel and Wex and Rurik, then they're taking up space too. So trolls were, I mean, again, they were in that precarious situation where you know, maybe they weren't as threat lizards, you know, like really all like level 50 plus or 55, Syndius and Chronoside, and then like I see like on the side like Rampage and Kothos and Pharaoh and like you know Brutal and a couple other trolls. And again, like I've fought invasions where it's like 40 chaos. So again, I've seen fights where it's like 10 lizards and 5 trolls and like 3 or 4 orcs and like 4 goblins. You're not gonna see more 9 times out of 10. If you saw that lineup, you're gonna see every single lizard covered, every orc covered, and maybe like, all right, well, after all of them, after they're all dead, then I guess pick your own targets, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you very rarely did you see, all right, well, we gotta kill, like Kothos has to die. Otherwise, like, he's gonna swing the tide of the fight. Like, no one ever did that because no one really took trolls seriously. But trolls were kind of left to their own devices in a lot of fights, you know? And that's where people like Pharaoh and Brutal and stuff like that really shined, because they were kind of like left to kind of do their thing, because we were so busy focusing on like people like Cortland and Blizzard and Skull and Daz, because we were scared of breath. We were scared of lizards, and you need to kill the healers, because if you don't kill the healers, then you're not going to be able to keep anyone down. And even we would easily pick goblins as targets well over trolls, because goblins had goblin bombs. So if you saw a sentinel and Wex and Rurik, then they're taking up space too. So trolls were, I mean, again, they were in that precarious situation where you know, maybe they weren't as threatening as the other jobs, but because of that fact, they were kind of like neglected as targets, and they were able to actually put up some pretty good damage and do decently, and in a lot of cases swing a lot of fights, because they were really underestimated and were able to kind of like do a lot of damage to certain people. Trolls really, they were a pretty good counter in fights to wolves. They could melee 2 wolves and do pretty good damage against wolves without having to zerk. but they again, the moment they zerked, they were just a waste of space. They just got destroyed. That
Right.
600 HP in that plate meant nothing. It meant
And
absolutely nothing.
It's so tempting too, because you want to
Yeah.
just kill the shit out of something, but you can't, and it's your bread and butter sort of. So I guess that